Hello, let us talk about quantitative versus qualitative variables and what we call implied population. So there's quite a few definitions in this first part of statistics. So let's just go through a few of these definitions to make sure that we're all keyed in on what the vocabulary is that we need to be aware of. So individuals are the people or objects included in our study. A variable is a characteristic of the individual to be measured or observed. A quantitative variable has a value or numerical measurement for which operations such as addition or averaging make sense. A qualitative variable describes an individual by placing the individual into a category or group such as male or female, so more like a classification. In population data, the data are from every individual of interest. In sample data, the data are only from some of the individuals of interest. So what we call, when we talk about like averaging, if we say that we're doing it for the entire population, that's going to be a population parameter. We call it a parameter when we're talking about we have all of the data from the entire population involved in our calculation. So it's a numerical measure that describes an aspect of the population. If we're doing the average, but we only do it of a sample, remember only some of the individuals of interest, then we call it a statistic. So a sample statistic is a numerical measure that describes an aspect of a sample. Okay, so let's look at this example right here. It says, identify the variable and state whether it is quantitative or qualitative and what is the implied population. So we're looking at some samples that were drawn and what did they measure. So it says a national survey asked 2,000 US teenagers how many hours they spent on homework in a day on average. So we are looking at measuring the number of hours spent on homework in a day on average. That's what we're measuring. So the variable is going to be the number of hours spent on homework. And then is the variable quantitative or qualitative, where they're going to, and we probably should put the rest of this in a day on average. We're going to be measuring these and giving numerical values. So like 7 hours, 6.2 hours, 1 hour, 0.05 hours. So depending on how that teenager responds, it's going to be a numerical data value. So this is a quantitative variable. And it makes sense for us to talk about adding and averaging with those values. And then the sample was the 2,000 US teenagers that we were surveying. The implied population of that group would be all US teenagers. Okay, let's look at the second one. A national survey asked 500 college students to list their favorite fast food restaurant. So our variable is going to be a name of a fast food restaurant. That's what we're observing or recording. And that's going to be something that's a name. So it's going to be like McDonald's, Burger King, Subway, Chick-fil-A, name dropping like crazy here. So it's going to be one of those fast food restaurant names. So that's going to be a qualitative because we can't add and average those. It's a name. And then the implied population from our survey, since they said they sampled 500 college students, we are going to be looking at, this is going to be all college students. So would be the implied population. All right, and my last two examples have to do with distinguishing between a parameter or a statistic. So it says determine if the underlying numerical value is a parameter or a statistic. So the average paycheck of 36 of a company's 300 employees is $2,300, where $2,300 was the reported measurable value that we got. But because we don't have all 300 employees in this calculation to get this amount, this calculation says that the average paycheck was from the 36 people they sampled. So this 2,300 does not represent all 300 employees. So we are going to say that this is a sample that we're looking at for this data value. So this is a statistic. And then the next one says a business found that 2% of its 400 employees drove electric cars. So notice they didn't reference a sample here. We are saying 2% of all of the 400 employees drove electric cars. So we are basing this percentage off of the entire group of employees, not just, a small subset of them. So this one is based off the whole population. So it is a parameter. Sorry. Okay, I hope that clarifies the difference between qualitative and quantitative, as well as statistic and parameter.